Hi, everybody. Thank you for being with us today. I know that we have a lot of people on this panel, and feel free to send us to text us where you're zooming from. Right. In any event, as you text me where you're from, I'll just introduce myself. So my name is Omer Granite. I'm based out of New York, Brooklyn. I'm a former IDF captain of Special Forces. I'm a PE investor, founder of a company called Mixer in Israel, and also founder of a hedge fund called Westport Capital. I'm a recovering attorney, worked for big law firms here in New York and in Israel. Um, and been very active in Israel, both in Brothers and Sisters in Arms and in Sayeret Nachal's NGO, their alumni association. I call myself the Brooklyn Brigade Commander for Brothers and Sisters in Arms. But since before October 7th and after October 7th, we've been doing a lot of things here in the US, both from the fundraising perspective to support Israel's people of Israel. And we've sent more than 500 tons of equipment, and we've helped the various communities all around. So before I start, I'd like to say something about the hostages. We still have 50 hostages left, and we need not to forget them. We always have to remind people of how important it is to put them on the spotlight, that we can't forget this is the first duty of any country is to its citizens. And even though last night there were three bodies returned, we have to remember the people that are still there and do whatever we can to help to make sure that they're back. Um, all right. So again, thank you so much for joining us from all over the world. A lot of the people I see from the US, some people from Canada, Montreal, Ottawa, Haifa, Israel, even London, Philly, Tel Aviv, Farsaba. So again, welcome. So today we have a great panel, four great individuals, very active in first of all in the military and in civil duties. Maybe I will let them introduce themselves. Ronen, will you start, please?
So my name is Ronen Kohler. I'm a 61 ex-Navy captain, which the Army calls colonel, but I'm a captain in the Navy. I was a submarine captain, and then I was a reservist actually until a few months ago, and I'm very active and one of the leaders in Brothers and Sisters in Arms, and currently in the shelter in central Tel Aviv, which we renovated and running for the citizens of central Tel Aviv, and I'm running it. So I'm at the shelter.
All right, Micha.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Micha Lawrence. I'm 57 years old. I live up north in the Jezreel Valley. I flew F-16s as an operational pilot for 30 years, 22 out of them in active reserve. And today I'm still doing active reserve in the Northern Central Command. In my civilian life, I'm in the high-tech sector, entrepreneur, and investor.
Noah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Noah. I was flying F-15I as a combat navigator for about a decade. I'm currently doing reserve duty at the headquarters in the Air Force. I'm planning targets for the bank of the Air Force. In my civilian life, I'm a mother and a fresh mother, and I'm also working in the high-tech sector as a product manager in a medical startup.
Iran.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here. In terms of my security background, I was in one of Israel's elite units, and then I joined the foreign ministry as a cadet, and then in various capacities in the diplomatic service. Then moved to the National Security Council in the Prime Minister's office, was deputy head, dealt with all the big issues, including Iran, and retired in 2014, and also went into the startup world. I have a company that's doing digital public participation, civic participation, some very interesting stuff. And I've been very active in the pro-democracy movement for as long as I can remember, 8 years or so. Happy to be here.
All right. Well, thank you. So initially, I wanted to, given Iran's role as in the Israeli National Security Council, I wanted to ask him about the process of how this war started. But given what happened yesterday when the U.S. The U.S. attacked the nuclear facilities, would be great if Iran, you could give us somewhat of a macro analysis of where we are in terms of where we are so far. What are the options ahead of us? In terms of Iran, I saw that you tweeted something about Russia and Medvedev saying something on maybe Russia providing Iran with weapons, the NPT, China, etc. So please, if you can, for the 10 minutes, give us an overview, and then we could jump into more specific things.
Do we want a scary version?
I want the realistic version.
All right. We are in uncharted territory. That's the truth. Nobody has been here before. Not an American president. It's the first time that America is attacking Iran. And it's the first time that it is doing so unprovoked. It's also the first time that it's doing so against a nuclear or a set of nuclear facilities. And it's the first time that it's doing so in the service of an ally, i.e. Israel. In terms of Israel, it's the first time that we are at war for over 600 days in 8 fronts. It's the first time that we have attacked in a war of choice the country of Iran. It's the first time since 1973 that we are fighting a nation state rather than an state actor. And I could go on and on. There are many, many firsts here. How did we get here? I would say, again, depending on how you choose to describe it, but I think, again, the most important thing for you to understand, for everybody to understand, is that there was no clear-cut casus belli, like a direct, immediate cause for Israel to launch this war of choice against Iran. There is an Israeli narrative that is trying to portray exactly that kind of situation, as if, we had no choice, they dashed to a bomb, we have all the evidence. But this is a story that nobody's buying, not the CIA, not the DNI in the States, not the MI6, not the French security service, and not anybody else. And even Israel itself, when it had to submit kind of a formal judicial international legal defense to the UN, did not say that we were attacked or that it was a casus belli, but rather chose, and not that we're exercising our right of self-defense, but rather that we are in an ongoing conflict with Iran. So, and that issue obviously is very important for the Americans in the audience. It brings bad memories from the Iraq War and Colin Powell in the UN Security Council and the manipulation of intelligence material. And that puts the whole kind of Iranian context in a somewhat problematic light. And it will continue to be the case for years to come. However, having said that, it's very clear that Israel had a strategic opportunity after having successfully, significantly weakened both Hezbollah and Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, which were the components of the so-called ring of fire or choke ring around Israel that Iran has built in the course of the last 20 or plus years. And there is a strategic rationale that probably came both from Netanyahu, who's been pursuing this issue, as you know, for over 30 years, but also from the military echelons and intelligence echelons, essentially building a picture of a unique strategic opportunity to strike Iran, to debilitate its capabilities, both on the nuclear and on the long-range missiles project, and more broadly, which is the more kind of ambiguous and kind of intriguing part of all of this. In terms of the actual war aims, as far as they were published so far, and I was fortunate to deal with these issues very closely. I wrote slides for Israeli cabinets with war aims, so I can tell you that every word counts. And we don't know exactly the formulation that actually the cabinet decided and voted on. What we do know is that the goal was not to totally annihilate the Iranian nuclear project, because that's not possible for Israel, not even possible for the Americans. Same goes for the long-range missiles capability. It's not annihilating. It's significantly damaging both those projects. And then comes the third, which is the more ambiguous and the more challenging, as surprising as it may sound, which is creating the diplomatic strategic conditions for long-term debilitation of both the nuclear project and the long-range missiles project. Now, what are those diplomatic conditions? That's very vague. Do they include a regime change? Formally, no. If you ask the chief of the IDF or the head of Mossad, certainly on camera, they will say no. But Netanyahu has started in the last days articulating exactly that. And again, for the Americans in the crowd, you all realize how potentially toxic, politically and strategically, a regime change adventure in the Middle East is. So, to sum it up, I would say the following. Up until now, we have very significant, unprecedented achievements on the first two counts, on damaging the nuclear project and on damaging the long-range missiles capabilities, but they have not been annihilated. It's very probable that even after the American attack, there are residual capabilities, and they could be such that Iran can relatively quickly dash to a bomb, one device, dirty bomb, all sorts of possibilities, which effectively will make Iran a nuclear state with everything that entails. They could also fake it, because now that the IAEA monitors are out, nobody is in a position to actually ascertain what exists and what does not exist. And Garoussi, the head of the IAEA, just said in an interview, nobody knows. We don't know what was hit and what was not. We cannot account for the material and so on. So the Iranians can describe a certain achievement, and nobody will be in a position to ascertain, is it true or false? And there are all sorts of other possible scenarios for escalation. I don't want to sound too scary. Relating to what you said about Medvedev, it was a very almost strange, bizarre set of tweets where he essentially said, okay, now we can say it out in the open. The process of military and the production of military nuclear capability in Iran can now move freely. And there are third countries or third parties that are now in a position to provide Iran with nuclear warheads. And that's somebody who was the president of Russia, the prime minister of Russia, and is now the deputy head of the National Security Council in Russia. So things are by no means finished, contrary to what you might hear in some media outlets. Could be just the beginning. We could enter a long period of attrition. Just virtually now, a minute ago, I saw on Ynet that so-called Israeli official said that if Khamenei now says he's willing to stop, we will stop. To me, that's strategic foolishness, but I'll put it aside. So it's the jury is out, and even though we have a very significant achievement, the Iranian position now is, okay, you were able to start it, but we are the ones that will determine when it finishes and how. And I'll end by saying that I advise everybody to read the editorial comment of the Washington Post today that has a good description of how we got so far, including the fact, and this is important coming from the editorial board of the Washington Post, Netanyahu is the one that dragged Trump into this war. Okay, it's not a question mark, it's an assertion. And the bottom line is, Trump may now want to finish this, but he's not able to. He's dependent on Netanyahu and on Khamenei.
All right, thank you, Eran. I'll get back. I have a lot of questions, so hopefully we'll be able to come back. I want to ask a question to all of you. Obviously, unlike October 7th, it seems that this was a different. This is a war that the IDF, IAF, the Navy was prepared for. Could you talk a little bit, and then we could start maybe with Ronen and Noah. This is a question for all of you. What do you think is the biggest difference between the Israel's performance, the readiness, if you can distinguish between October 7th and the success of this campaign so far? Again, I'm going to disclaim this.
So I would say from my perspective, after almost 42 years as a reservist, I think the biggest difference is the fact that the army, not really the Air Force, I think the Air Force is different, but definitely the Army and the Navy have kind of two families of behaviors. One is the ongoing, constant work that we do at the borders, that is very routine, done by I'd say not very elite units. Discipline is not high. The personnel is not the best personnel, generally speaking, and have this with a low discipline, with a very, very, very almost fundamental attack or fundamental surprise that caught the Army and the Navy, less the Air Force. I think the Air Force got too much heat, unjust heat, but the Navy and the Army was caught on surprise while it was in a very low level of performance. And that's the outcome of October 7th, I think. What's happening now is that the other IDF, the elite IDF, the ones that are been preparing operations for years and preparing procedures for years and been practicing for years, they are now into play. Their intelligence apparatus, obviously. And I think that's the difference. We had, and I've spent the last 15 years in the audit team of the IDF. I was the chief auditor of the Navy. And I think we had two armies. One is the regular army and one is the well-prepared elite army. And the regular army was just not good enough.
Yeah, Noah, anything, how do you feel that the military was prepared for this versus October 7th?
I totally agree. On October 7th, the military haven't prepared at all. They were caught by surprise, and it's very obvious. Unlike in this case, this is a case we came prepared. We were preparing for years. Maybe only a selected few were trained and briefed for such a scenario. But in such a case, you go over the plan again and again in your head and think about different situations that might happen, and you train for it. So on the real, in the money time, you are just doing things automatically. You are so trained and you are well prepared, and it's 180 degrees from October 7th.
Omer, if I may add something. In my mind, the big difference is very simply the decision of the country. Because if you look at Iran, Israel made a decision 25 years ago that Iran is a major arena that we have to be prepared. That means that all the resources went to the Mossad and other intelligence units. And that was the main focus. In Lebanon, in the Northern Front, where at least I am part of it, and I know very well, we were very well prepared because that was the decision and that was the priority and that was the budgets and everything to do with that. In Gaza, the political level decided not to focus on that, and everything else is secondary to that. So I think that's, to me, it's all about the decision of the political level, and then executing that in the intelligence and in the military forces, and that's how you see things pan out.
If I may add an example, my squadron, 69 Squadron, the jets were purchased in 1998 exactly for this purpose. So this was what the Air Force had in mind, 1998.
All right. So if I may ask the both of you, if you could tell us a little bit about the preparations for this mission and how do you achieve dominance in the sky like we've achieved, like the IAF achieved it, and how and I'm just like, if you could tell a little bit about the logistics of this. How long does it take to get to Iran? As a pilot, like how do you pee? You have like a special, like what do you do? So just tell us a little bit about that also.
No, go ahead.
I think you have more experience in that, but it takes a lot of time to arrive at Iran. You divide the road to segments. So as a navigator, on each, I'm talking from my experience on similar missions. I haven't been to Iran, but you segment the route. So each time you have your alternate base, the fuel you want to see, how much fuel you want to add through air refueling, where all the rest of the company shall be in the air. Of course, you monitor the radar, and each time you have to go, we have like a kind of a book that you have to read through, and you have to know almost by heart, because usually it's dark, so you can't really see this book. You have to know where you want to be, what you want to see exactly. And as I said, it comes automatically because you do it again and again, and you trust your training, you trust the aircraft, you trust your pilot and the team around you, and it helps you stay calm and manage your stress. And you know that everyone in the crew was chosen for this mission, and it gives you kind of confidence, even when the mission is complex. So maybe you've done such missions in the past, and it really helps.
Yeah, from my perspective, from the cockpit of a foursome leader, there are a few key elements here for the success of this. First of all is the planning and the intelligence. So this type of mission needs very careful planning. We have been training for that for many years. I've done these kind of flights, not to Iran, unfortunately, but the same length and complexity many times. And you need to plan on the Air Force level and also on the squadron level for all the things you're going to encounter and all the decisions you need to be making. The second thing is, of course, you need a very, very good intelligence. You can take all the bombs you want, 2,000 kilometers, but if you don't have the right intelligence and the right target, it's useless. So intelligence is extremely important here. But I think if you look at this particular case of Iran, what really enabled us to have such a high success is the fact that we gained air superiority. Now, since Yom Kippur War, the number one mission of the Air Force is always air superiority. And we know that, and I mean, we always put a lot of emphasis on that, because if you don't have air superiority, you're just going to be unsuccessful again and again and again. So you have to spend a lot of energy and time first gaining air superiority and only then starting to bomb the targets. So here, as it happened, the Assad regime collapsed. So it allowed us to annihilate all of the SAM missiles on the way in Syria and in Iraq, which meant that now we have a clear corridor all the way from Israel. If you take a line from Israel, you go through Syria and then Iraq and then Iran. So we have a very clear path of no threats from SAM missiles, surface to air missiles, all the way. And this is a key factor, because if you can fly straight and calm without any threats, and you can do your air refueling, you can have other elements of the mission to support you. This enables you basically to do it again and again and again in a very orderly fashion, in a very calm way, and that's the key to this
So was this,
to this arena.
so two questions here. First of all, do you think this would, so if Hezbollah wouldn't have been degraded to the level it is today, and Assad regime was still in power, Was this possible at all?
I don't think it will be possible. It will be extremely more complicated because then you need to do low-level flying. You need to try and go around the threats. It just becomes extremely hard to get any significant amount of ammunition over to the other side. So I think this is kind of, as Iran said, it was a strategic opportunity where we had air superiority all over the Middle East, basically, and we could execute that in a much more efficient way.
Yeah. Okay. So there was an opportunity, and I wanted to ask Ronen something, but before that, because I wanted to ask Iran, let's talk about the decision making and the process around this. I mean, in the US, and there's a lot of criticism towards Trump today that it didn't ask the Congress for permission to start a war. Now, I know the Obama bombed a lot of places, and but in Israel, what is the process? 'Cause I hear some criticism, obviously not enough, but that there are no processes, and that Netanyahu has essentially decided on his own to drag Israel into something that could be a 30-year war. I don't know. I'm going to leave this to you to kind of like analyze, but talk a little bit about the process in what is the process in Israel? Is the parliament approval required at all, or what? From your position at the Israeli National Security Council, what do you see?
Yeah. That's a very good question, a very interesting area, though unfortunately the situation is pretty depressing. First of all, in terms of the legal situation, the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, doesn't have any role whatsoever in deciding to go or not to go to war. It's all with the executive branch, with the government, and the government can delegate the authority to the cabinet. Now, there was an attempt by Netanyahu some years ago to further kind of limit the legal process or the decision-making process, and to give essentially himself, with potentially one more person, the authority to go to war. He actually was able to push it through initially as a legislation, and then because of public fury, he had to retreat. And the kind of smallest body that can declare war is the Israeli cabinet. Now, the Israeli cabinet is a 14-member body, which of which some members are obligatory, like the Minister of Defense, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Justice, and so on. And others are for the decision of the Prime Minister, and some of them can also be observers and so on. At any rate, in today's Israel, the cabinet has also been hollowed out, and all powers and decision-making processes are essentially totally controlled by Netanyahu with no checks and balances whatsoever, not legal, not parliamentary, not others. And in this case, it went so far as to actually call this, which is probably the most important and kind of fatal decision that an Israeli cabinet took in the last, I don't know, 40 years. It has been downgraded, quote unquote, for political and legal purposes into just an operation. They don't even call it a war. They call it an operation, which is ludicrous. And so on paper, the situation, the process should have been more regimented with the full cabinet, and then as soon as possible, they're supposed to deliver an official notice to the Israeli parliament that war has been declared, and there are all sorts of other actions that need to be taken and were not taken. They have diluted this formally into an operation, even though it's a full-fledged war. And one last thing I would say, if I have one more minute, is that more kind of into the essence of things, what apparently happened is that while there was some degree of agreement and kind of proper deliberation or processes between the professional echelons, the IDF, the Mossad in this case, and others, kind of the highest levels of the professional echelons on the one hand, and Netanyahu and a few others on the political side, while there were some deliberations and so on, ultimately, that's my impression, contrary to other events, some of which I attended personally, there was no, even though probably there were some disagreements and some dissatisfaction on the part of the professionals in terms of perhaps not whether or not we need to do it, but how do we need to do it, and what kind of coordination has to happen with the Americans, and whether or not the so-called light that we get from them must be green or can it be yellow, and all sorts of other nuances. While apparently there were some disagreements, contrary to the past, that the heads of the IDF and Mossad and Shin Bet felt enough professional independence and integrity and gravitas to stand up to the prime minister and say no. This time, I'm afraid it was different.
Okay. Ronen, given your experience at the Navy, I'd love to hear a little bit about the collaboration between the different, we talk about the IAF, and maybe Iran, you could also talk about boots on the ground in Iran, Shaldag or others, hunting the missiles like the SAS in the Gulf War. But Ronen, I saw that there were destroyers in the Red Sea during an operation in the Houthis. Is the Israeli Navy a part of this, and how so?
So yes, the answer is yes. I think it's for the first time since, it's not, I think, I know that from the first time since 1973, we are actually operating in the Red Sea in massive forces. Now it's the Navy new projects actually are now coming into place. The Dolphin class submarines that for the first time in years, it's not a secret because they passed through the Suez Canal. Something to mention, Iran didn't even talk about it, about the fact that the Egyptians allow us to get Navy vessels through the Suez Canal. This is, I think, a big thing. And so submarines in the Red Sea, SAR 6 and SAR 5 frigates in the Red Sea. This is a big thing, and the SAR 6 and SAR 5, and definitely the Dolphin class, the new ones, the Dolphin AIP, or independent propulsion, they are, I want to say, without saying too much, a strategic asset that has the advantage on top of the Air Force. The Air Force is absolutely winner of the skies, but having an asset like a submarine or like a SAR 6 frigate spending its time for weeks, essentially, in the Red Sea, I think has a major advantage to all of these operations. I'm not talking about the weapon they carry, but even just being there is something that has a strategic aspect, I think, to the national security of Israel.
All right. And Noah and Iran, I'll get back to you with the boots on the ground. But Noah, tell us a little bit about your experience. I know that there's a few female aviators, and what is the most challenging part about being a woman, doing a mission like this, operationally, mentally, culturally? It would be great if you could share your thoughts on this.
I think this is a great example of how women can contribute. I don't know if this audience aware of the fact that 16 women took part in the flights to Iran in all various jobs as pilots, navigators, and air refuelers. And in this type of missions, you're usually the only woman in the room. Also, by the way, there are a lot of technicians. More than 50% of the technicians nowadays in the Air Force are women as well. And these technicians sometimes are involved in the top secret missions. And when they train for it, the squadron is empty, and only exactly this group that are part of this top secret mission are there, as well as the technicians. So you have to build trust as anyone else, but you feel that you have more room for mistakes, and that all eyes are on you sometimes. Some people have old ideas, even if they don't say it out loud, so you feel it. But once you're flying and doing your mission, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, only that you do your job right. And it's very, very important in such missions that you do exactly what you were trained for. There is no room for errors for anyone. And when you do it well, it just shows that a woman belongs in this role, and that's it.
Right. So Micha, I have a question. I mean, you did mention air superiority, but we just to understand, like in Lebanon, we did have air superiorities, and all the wars, the Second Lebanon War, the First Lebanon War, and during the 18 years we spent in the how do you first of all, I did ask the question, how did we achieve such a like an absolute air superiority over Iran, which is a huge country? But in terms of the effectiveness of this air superiority, how did you distinguish the two wars or the two terrains essentially?
I think both in Lebanon and in Iran, we gained air superiority. I think in Iran even better than in Lebanon because Lebanon was much more influenced by the Syrian side, which some of the SAM missiles cover Lebanon, and it really was trouble for us. And at the time, the Russians were there, so we didn't want to get in that confrontation too much. But I think that this brings a very important point here, which is also one of the keys for success, is that here, for the first time since Yom Kippur War, we're actually fighting against a country with an army. In Lebanon, as well as in Gaza, we're fighting a terrorist organization. A terrorist organization has its headquarters in a 5-story apartment building, in one apartment, which all the rest of the apartments are just civilian families. So for the Air Force or for any force, it's very hard to fight that. But we are much more well equipped to fight another country where it has, the military bases. So to some extent, it's much easier to get the targets right and not to hit civilians because you're fighting a big army with its well-established camps and air force and airfields and the nuclear sites. They're all very you know exactly where they are. So in that respect, it's different and it's much easier for us.
And how long, and again, maybe you can't answer this question, but I know that I have a lot of friends that are in active duty pilots, and they're beyond retirement. So how long do you think the IAF and the Israel Defense Force in general, given the extent of how stretched it is, can hold on? This is, I mean, fighting a war which is 1,500 kilometers away. And this is maybe a question also for Iran and Noah and Ronen. Feel free to interject.
Yeah, I mean, Ronen maybe can answer that better than I do, but I think we have a serious issue with the reserve in Israel, as you know, where the reservists are carrying on their shoulders way too much, especially on the green side, not so much in the Air Force. And this is something on a national level to do with equality and stuff like that. But it's definitely something the country will need to deal with very soon.
I totally agree with Micha. Actually, Iran and myself, we were some of the signers of a petition to the Supreme Court in August 23, actually saying that the reserve army is in a very, very bad situation. I can say from many audits that I did, and I testified on it, the reserve army was already in a bad shape before October 7th. It was in a bad shape actually because it was not practicing enough and did not have enough budget, and the logistics were not well covered. So from these reasons, and then the judicial reform actually split the reserve army into two parts, and there were thousands of people or tens of thousands of people that even if they did not suspend their volunteering or suspend their reserve service, felt that the government is acting against them. So the situation of the reserve army was in a very bad shape in the last 2.5 years. And I think we are very lucky. Actually, I want to say if what is happening now would have happened 2 years from now, after a judicial reform, I'm not sure we would have been able to be in that level of success. And I think the reserve army is definitely, they're not the Air Force and not the intelligence, not the elite units. They're just the infantry and artillery and armored battalions. They will need a lot of work once we get over this.
Can I add something, Omer, or you want to move to?
No, please.
So from kind of an overall perspective, looking at the entire service model in Israel, military service, national service, civil service, and so on, it's a problem that probably many of you know has occupied Israel for decades. But now, one of the outcomes of this very peculiar and unprecedented situation that we find ourselves in, more than 600 days of war in multiple fronts, as was mentioned before by both Micha and Ronen, unprecedented burden levels on the reservists, also on the regular army and so on. The next government will have to totally reshape the entire model of national service, civic service, and military service, both pertaining to men, pertaining to women, pertaining to the general population, pertaining to the Haredi, ultra-Orthodox population, pertaining to the national religious population with all sorts of special arrangements that they had historically. And this is one of the most contentious issues in Israel already. It almost toppled the government just a few weeks ago. Their attempt at passing an exemption law for the ultra-Orthodox, which is against the will of 80% of Israelis, and will not fly. And it might very well go back to being a very pertinent issue and an imminent threat to the government in just a few weeks. But in any case, in the broader scheme of things, there is a huge question in terms of, let's assume for a minute that this whole huge war that we are now engaged in is finished in a matter of weeks or maybe a few months. And then we're in a situation where the threat levels on Israel have been very significantly reduced. Iran is diminished, Hamas is diminished, Hezbollah is diminished, Syria is non-existent as a threat. There's no Syrian military anymore. How does one reconcile that with further and further demands from the overall population to more and more military service, both in the regular army and in the reserve? It's not going to be trivial, and already I have a sensitive ear for that, all sorts of manipulations that are already being played. I don't want to kind of sound too certain about that, but I think in a positive scenario where we're able to translate the military achievements into actual diplomatic and strategic agreements and have a new regional order, which is all very possible, not with this government, but with a new and capable one. It's absolutely not necessary to go back to similar levels of burden on the reservists and on the regular military. We will need to totally revamp the overall model to enlist the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, to kind of create a much more equal situation in terms of the overall burden. But it's absolutely not set in stone that the levels of service, the average levels of service, will be heightened if and when, hopefully, this war is brought to a successful diplomatic end.
So we talked about the reserve, but let's talk about the Israeli public. I know, Onen, you're involved with this project, the Brothers and Sisters in Arm, working on the shelters. And again, all the members of this panel are based in Israel. So we'd love to hear from all of you, starting with Ronen, about how do you cope, Noah, you being a new mother, Micha, the family. So we'd love to hear about the experience in Israel. And Ronen, please, let's start with the project that you're working on.
So yes, I would start by saying that I think in most of the cities there are enough ways to protect yourself. Not all, our population is not, but let's take Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv has enough public shelters for people. And now, central Tel Aviv is a very old city. The houses are all bricks, so you can't stay at home. You don't have a safe room, and people are protected. The problem was that we found out last week that actually all these public shelters are absolutely not maintained. They are not, even if they are clean, they don't have any level of comfort. Someone asked me about the pictures from World War II of the British people in the underground stations, sitting all by themselves. There, 10 or hundreds of thousands of people in the underground tunnels, and said, why can't Israel do that? Israel cannot do it. Okay, and what we found out. That the ability to make it a little bit better is very easy. So on Tuesday, a bunch of us, 15 of us, members of Brothers and Sisters in Arms, we decided to run a project, a very quick and dirty project of taking the Dizengoff Center shelter, or it's a parking lot that is certified as a shelter, and try and make it nicer. So within 4 hours, and that's an example for something that it took us 15 people 4 hours to make the shelter much nicer, with tents for people, with mattresses, with some water, like with a coffee corner, a playground for children. And on Tuesday night, hundreds of people who came to this shelter saw a new type of shelter. The reason, and obviously it spread all over the social networks, and on Wednesday it was covered all over the media in Israel. And we are a team, but I stayed as the one who manages the shelter in Tel Aviv, the Dizengoff Center shelter. The coverage of it is phenomenal. I think I interviewed to 30 different foreign channels in the last 3 days. But my point here is that it took us 4 hours to do it. The government had, I don't know, 30 years to do it, and all it took is tents, mattresses, someone that organizes the place. That's it. And so the image of here is a tent that Achim LaNeshek, or here is a shelter that Achim LaNeshek was able to make so great within a day was all over. And now we are getting more and more calls from municipalities. And from now on, we are not the bad guys anymore. All the municipalities are calling us, say, help us fix our shelters. We are opening. We opened yesterday in the central bus station in Tel Aviv, which is the worst place you can find in Tel Aviv if you have ever been there.
But it's an atomic shelter, right? It's for
an atomic shelter, but no one got into this place in the last 20 years. It's full of rats, and it's terrible. So we cleaned it now, and this is for the the poorest population in Israel. The foreign workers, the Africans, the Asians. So and we did one in Rishon. So for me, it's an example of how this patriotism of good people, and it's not a political thing. I said yesterday to Channel 12, everybody knows what you think of Netanyahu and his government. It's not a secret. I don't have to hide it. But doing this is because it's the right thing to do for the people of Israel, because someone else is not doing it, and it's a very simple thing to do. So yes, it's an exciting and very emotional project, and the people are all day long coming and thanking us.
Okay, so let me just, before, we don't have a lot of time, I'd like, so then there's some questions, but before that, I'd like Eran to kind of, if you can, please summarize, but first also, you could talk about the elephant in the room, the Gaza. What do we do with Gaza? What do we do with the hostages? What do we do with the Palestinian issue? Where do we go from here? Essentially, again, if you could take 5 minutes, and then I'll have 5 minutes for Q&A. I'm sorry, but this is the time that we have.
Sure. So, what can happen from here on, as I said, depends largely on Khamenei, if he survives or whoever replaces him, Netanyahu, and Trump. And it could go in several directions. I'll put it very simply, and then I'll talk about the connection, the linkages to Gaza. It could go into escalation, and the Iranians still have a number of cards in their hands towards escalation. It could go towards an agreement, and the Iranians again can choose that path. We spoke about it, either capitulation or short of that. It could go to attrition, which makes significant sense, unfortunately, from an Iranian perspective. And these are kind of the Iranian choices. Trump also has a choice. Trump can choose to be, shall we say, more active or less. He has an option, as he so often does, after kind of touching a certain issue and creating havoc, to leave it all together and move to the next issue. And leave the sides to kind of play it out. We'll see what happens, as he likes to say. Or he can be much more interventionist and bold and ambitious, and try to shape not only the future of Israel-Iran relations, but the future of the region. And here is where potentially Gaza can come in. I have to say that personally, I don't think Trump cares, quote unquote, about Gaza. I think it's a classic example of what I just said. I mean, he demonstrated interest at some point. We all remember the Gaza Riviera and all of that. And then when he realized it's not going to happen, certainly not quickly, he lost interest. So now he has an opportunity. And I suspect that the Saudis, the Emiratis, maybe the Qataris, and the Europeans are trying or will try to push him in that direction, to try and reshape the region, kind of leveraging the Israeli and American military achievements on the field towards a diplomatic solution or a new security architecture. And that can potentially have 3 layers. One is a new agreement on the nuclear issue between the Iranians, the Americans, and probably some others, because the Iranians do not trust the Americans. So it can be the Russians, can be the Saudis, can be Chinese, whatever. All the superpowers like in the JCPOA, whatever. But kind of taking care of closing the Iranian nuclear file. And that's the first layer. The second, and obviously I'm just expressing my own opinion, it's something that I've believed for a while, and I'm only kind of becoming more and more certain that's the way to go, is a bilateral agreement between Israel and Iran, something which is not talked about at all. But I think in this day and age, where as Israel, we should be more autonomous, strategically autonomous as much as possible, and not be totally reliant on the US or on any other superpower. It is our interest now that we have demonstrated our ability to win over the Iranians, if you want, and to deter the Iranians and so on, to create a situation where there is an agreed balance of deterrence and non-belligerency between us and the Iranians. And I think it's possible and important as kind of a second layer. And then the third layer, and this is where Gaza and the Palestinian issue comes in, on the eve of this war, the situation was such that there was a very significant Saudi-French initiative to which essentially all world powers, with the exception of Trump, were party to. They were about to meet in the UN on June 17 with a very detailed plan that, if executed, would totally transform the region based on a political permanent solution to the Israeli-Palestinian issue or conflict and to the Israeli-Arab conflict, based on the Saudi initiative, based on the two-state solution, based on so on and so forth, but essentially rearranging the entire strategic situation between Israel, the Palestinians, and the Arabs. And it was on its way. It gained diplomatic momentum. And then Israel struck Iran and everything again. The conference was postponed and all of that. But now, if we're looking at potential end state, I would say this is the desired end state. And there is an opportunity with Trump playing a very active role, with MBS playing a very active role, with the Europeans playing a more active role than usual, and using the uncomfortable situation that has now been created from the perspective of Russia and China in the Persian Gulf to really bring about a whole new regional security architecture. It takes a lot of diplomatic effort. Unfortunately, we don't have a Kissinger or a Brzezinski anymore. And the caliber of the figures on all sides is not what I would like it to be. But still, I think in terms of the actual kind of raw material that a statement has to rearrange it in a conducive way and create a win-win situation is very significant.
Okay, thanks. Let me ask a few questions before we don't have a lot of time, but people are very in the chat are very worried about the destruction coming from the Iranian, more ballistic missiles. What are the chances that we're going to see like massive waves of ballistic missiles and drones, and after what the level of how degraded is their capability basically?
You're asking me?
Anyone from the panel? Yes.
It's first of all, I don't know. Okay, I'm not privy to the data, not on their level of degradation and not on our level of reserves in terms of counter missiles and all of that. I think we are pretty far from eliminating the threat altogether. And I think recent experience, both in Gaza and certainly in Lebanon, shows that if the strategy is to totally empty each and every capability they have, then it's going to take a long time, and it's probably not the smartest way to go. So an attrition, I don't think will work in our favor. So the strategy is, I would assume the strategy should be not to try and hunt each and every missile, not to exhaust whatever reserve of counter missiles that we still have, but rather to try and cut this war short in a smart diplomatic way, leveraging Trump, leveraging Russia, leveraging the fact that almost everybody involved does not have an interest in extending it.
Okay, one more question. How do the Arab countries?
Omer, if I may intervene here, as I have some visibility on how are we doing. So I think we are doing a lot of damage, both on the ballistic missiles and the drones. I think it's they have basically it's divided to you have launchers and you have the missiles. So what's really important is to go after their launchers, because each launcher has many missiles that it can launch, and I think we're doing a good job. So I don't see massive strikes coming in the future. It will get, I think, lower and lower. Maybe it will continue for a long time, but lower and lower. On the drones, just to give you a taste of where we are, the Iranians already launched more than 1,000 drones to Israel, which only one actually made any damage. It's the one that hit Beit Shan yesterday. So the interception level here is extremely high, not only by us, but also with help of friends.
That actually brings me to my next question, Micha. How do, and maybe Iran and Ronen, Arab countries, do they view Israel now after they saw what happened in Iran as Israel as a threat or a partner?
Generally speaking, they haven't seen Israel as a threat to their national security, not a direct threat, for a long time. certainly if we're talking about the Gulfies. But when it comes to, for example, Egypt and Jordan, it's a more complicated story. We obviously have peace agreements with them, but putting aside the Iranian issue, up until now, because of the Gaza situation, both of them are extremely, extremely concerned with some of the designs that some in Israel are promoting. The transfer, the forced transfer of Palestinians from Gaza to Egypt, from Gaza to Jordan, or whatever, from their perspective, is an existential threat to the regime and to their overall strategy, and an imminent threat to the future of the peace agreements of Israel. So the picture with them is quite complex. And as I said before, when it comes to the Gulfies, the Saudis, Emiratis, and so on the one hand, they are pleased to see Iran being damaged, but they're extremely concerned with the undermining of regional stability, which from their perspective is a second priority. The first is preserving the regime. The second is regional stability. So Israel can be seen almost simultaneously, both as an asset and as a tremendous liability.
All right, I think our time is up. Even though there are a lot more questions, and I do apologize. I think it was a fascinating debate, and we would probably be making a few more of these. I want to thank our panelists, Ronen, Micha, Noam, and Eran, and the aid team, Bianca, Giovanni, and Tali. And again, I pray for the hostages to come back as soon as possible and for peaceful, better times. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.